I'm Scott Ott, and this is Bill Whittle Now. Bill, there has been a second campaign discovered in the state of Alabama during the 2017 senatorial race that featured Democrat Doug Jones and Republican Roy Moore, that there are progressives behind an effort to associate the Republican with a campaign they thought would be unpopular among certain voters. And let me be more specific. Previously, you may have heard in the news that there was a campaign designed to suggest that the Russians were supportive of Roy Moore's candidacy. The latest found in the New York Times is a campaign that included a Facebook page and spent a bunch of money in the last couple of weeks of the election called Dry Alabama. And it was a campaign allegedly by teetotaling Baptists who were supportive of Senate candidate Roy Moore, former Judge Roy Moore, designed to turn off moderate Republicans who were kind of business-oriented people but didn't buy into that sort of social agenda, and would help with that very tight race with Doug Jones by pushing some moderate Republicans out of just keeping them from voting or pushing them over toward the Democratic candidate. Bill, first of all, I just want to get your reaction to what you think of the idea of these people running these sort of indirect bank shot campaigns that really won't show up on anybody's finance report.
Well, they're not indirect campaigns. They're false flag defamations. I mean, it's just that simple. It reminds me enormously of the stuff we saw in the early days of the Tea Party, where the left was so convinced that the Tea Party was racist, they went out to take pictures of the Tea Party events so they could show the racist posters. And since nobody had any racist posters, then they had to go out and make racist posters that left-wingers held up as representatives of the Tea Party. This is exactly the same kind of thing. It's just plain dirty tricks. Dirty pool, playing dirty. So let me just say two things about people that play dirty. First of all, if you're willing to do something like this, you have no moral core at all. If you're willing to basically lie to people, to invent something that the other candidate doesn't do, had no intention of doing, and you invent it simply to defeat that person, you have no character. You have no honor. You have no sense of honesty. You have no sense of decency. And that's why you're a progressive. So that's pretty straightforward, but it does tell us again and again and again the kind of people that we're dealing with. And the second thing I would say about this philosophically is, what does it say about a philosophy that has to just consistently go back to these kind of tricks? What does it say about a philosophy where if you come out and openly say what it is about your philosophy that you really believe, you know you're going to lose an election? How weak is the philosophical and the historical underpinnings of collectivism and socialism and leftism and progressivism and all of that? How weak is it if the people who are the biggest champions of it can't just come out and say, hey, I'm a socialist, and furthermore are constantly, perpetually looking at ways to cheat in order to gain the power that they could never get if they were just plain honest, as we try to be and usually are?
Well, Bill, one of these progressive consultants who was involved in running this campaign, this Dry Alabama campaign, so-called, that was pushing for prohibition in that state, basically said, I don't like these tactics. I think that these are not morally good tactics. However, we know that the other side uses them, and if we don't use them, we're going to lose the race. Now, Bill, I'll tell you what, that sounds awfully close to an argument I've heard you make, which is basically if that's the Democrats have set the field and we have to play on the field that's been set, and so we may have to do things we don't like.
This is like the Japanese responding to the Marines' increasing unwillingness to take Japanese prisoners as something that is evil about the Marines. It completely ignores the entire causality of all of this. And furthermore, I know he's lying about this, Scott, because this strategy, even if we lacked the character in order to undergo it, we cannot pull off these kind of strategies because we don't have the news media as our shield and as our sword. We don't have the media cloak of invisibility to go out and rearrange the furniture in the middle of the night so you bang your toe. We don't have that ability. In order to do something like a Dry Alabama campaign, you have to have a press corps that's willing to go along with it enough to publicize it, and yet they've got to be so ideologically left-wing that they would never actually investigate to see whether it's true or not. I'm a personal victim of this kind of thing, and so is virtually everybody else. They're low, mean people. Well, and yes, if he wants to say that the Republicans are fighting dirty, so we have to fight dirty, that's fine. That's exactly what I've been saying. But there is a causality here. If you go to a murder scene and there's a guy with a smoking gun and a guy on the ground who's bled out to death, these people are not equally innocent of what happened just before you arrived. There's no moral parity between these two people.
Well, apparently this kind of campaign was actually targeted to fly below the radar of the mainstream media, and apparently was fairly successful at doing that by targeting things like using Facebook. And what they want to do is...
So hold on.
They knew if they attracted attention to themselves...
Hold on. Let's just stop it right there. When you say by using Facebook, you've just completely made my argument. Right? When I say the news media, I'm also talking about the people who censor social news networks like Facebook and who eliminate conservative messages and propagate progressive ones. So if you're trying to tell me that the left, with this lying campaign of defamation, was somehow undercover and beneath the radar by promoting it on Facebook, I just have to cut you off in mid-sentence. Listen, Scott, this campaign doesn't make any sense at all. Forget the topic. It doesn't make any sense at all if people don't hear about it, right? If the average moderate voter doesn't hear the message about this fake idea of trying to eliminate alcohol, if the voter doesn't hear that message, then the message has no effect. So obviously they're promoting the message, and obviously they've got the tailwind to promote the message, which is why no matter what this guy says, even if we lack the character and we decided to go ahead and do something like this, we simply would not be able to pull it off because of the cultural headwind in the news media and on social media as well.
Cases like this just reinforce the idea that we need a lot more federal oversight and regulation of elections in order to prevent these kinds of things, because literally that race came down to the wire, just a handful of votes. And who knows if they didn't swing a few moderate Republicans through that dry Alabama campaign. Aren't the Democrats right, essentially? Shouldn't there be a lot more regulation of this, and everybody's name who's involved in any aspect of political manipulation should be public knowledge?
Any sentence that begins with "there should be a lot more government regulation" is going to end in a lie. I don't care what comes after that. It's just plain not true. So if you're thinking I'm saying, well, it was unfair what they did and we should have the government step in and stop them, I'm not saying that at all. I don't want to live in a society like that. The person whose fault this is the candidates, right? It's the judge, right? I mean, he was aware, certainly. He must have been aware, if the average voter was aware, that there was a campaign saying that he supported dry state. He must have been aware of it. Why didn't he respond to it?
It's not clear how many people were aware of it, and it looks like they weren't. Again, I think, Bill, this kind of stealth campaign was not designed to get general attention. It was designed to nibble at the margins.
But listen, Scotty, you cannot have the entire purpose of this kind of a campaign is to influence people's minds, right? Can we agree on that?
Yes, but not everybody.
Okay, not everybody, but that means it has to be out there, right? Because if it's not, if 5 people see it and they all work at Starbucks, then it's not going to make any difference in the voting. It has to be promoted enough for the average citizen of the state who might be right down the middle to have a chance to see this thing. And if it turns out that there's enough of that out there to actually potentially influence the vote, then certainly there's enough activity for somebody on his campaign to be aware of what was going on. And the thing that's tragic to me, and I see this all the time with these Republican candidates, is you could have turned what they were using maybe as a .22 caliber pistol, you could have turned that into a nuclear weapon against them if you'd had the fundamental savvy and honesty to just come out and say, hey, see this ad campaign? Hey, see this Facebook? See, it's not so hard, Scott. I go out to the press conference and I have an iPad and I hold it up. I say, see this page? I'm in favor of a dry county. I'm not. It's a lie. It's a lie that's put on by my opponents. My opponents are lying to you to get them to vote for them. And if they're lying to you to get you to vote for them, then you have to give some very serious thought about what they want to be in power for and how they're going to behave when they get there. And then you shut your mouth and you leave. And how hard is this?
Well,
impossible,
it just made me think reading that as the average voter has got to be saying to himself, what can we believe anymore? We can't expect the candidate is going to address every little marginal claim that's made on him about him on social media. He would be completely thrown off message all the time. How can I prepare myself to walk into that ballot box when could be half the stuff I'm seeing on social media is just made up stuff by political enemies, but we don't know about it because there's no law requiring them to reveal their sources.
Well, if there's a law that was requiring people to speak the truth and have documentary evidence of it, then this is not a place I want to live anymore, even though as paradoxical as it sounds, I'm completely in favor of speaking the truth. Speaking the truth and avoiding lying, Scott, the ability to avoid lying is not something that can be imposed upon you by a heavy boot from above. The inability to lie, the inability to defame somebody doesn't come from the big muddy boot that's going to be on the human face for 1,000 years, as George Orwell said. That's not where it comes from. The inability to slander somebody comes from inside you, and it comes from a place of decency and a sense of fundamental morality, a sense of fundamental humanity that says that I wouldn't want to have this happen to me. I'm not going to do it to somebody else. I don't care if it costs me the election. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to. It's not worth my soul for it. So this is the issue. You can't say we need more government so that we can get more truth. What you have to understand, and the thing that we keep coming back to here again and again and again and again and again and again and again, is that these people are masters of this kind of thing. But the defense against them is so simple, and it's so powerful, and it's such an incredible opportunity for them to be hoisted by their own petard, and we just don't know how to do it. We just don't.
The closest thing I ever saw to this from the other side was years ago, Rush Limbaugh's so-called Operation Chaos. However, that was like a piece of satire. That was open. He was talking about that every day on the radio, basically suggesting that that Republicans would sow chaos by going out in the primaries and voting for the wrong Democratic candidate.
Okay, so now we're down to the nub of the issue here. If Rush Limbaugh had put his not insignificant finances into a campaign to influence the election, and he did it privately, and his name wasn't attached to it, and he did it in such a way as to make it look like it was coming from Ruth Bader Ginsburg, let's say, then Rush Limbaugh would be as guilty as these clowns are, and he'd be just as disgusting as they are. But that's not what Rush Limbaugh did. Rush Limbaugh got on the air and said, "Hi, I'm Rush Limbaugh, conservative champion of America, and I'm saying to all of our conservative friends out there that we should go out and register in the Democratic Party." Now, that is an open political statement that anybody can identify immediately. Rush Limbaugh, okay, right? If you want to make that case of Rush Limbaugh's equivalent to the one that we just talked about with this keep the state dry campaign, then what would have had to happen would have had to been Nancy Pelosi or Bernie Sanders or somebody should have been able to stand up and say, "Hey, we all need to go out there and we need to vote because we think there's a chance that he might turn the state dry." At which point you simply have a press conference and the Republican candidate says, "It's an absolute lie. It's not part of my campaign. No one's ever heard me say it. They're not hearing me say it now. In fact, they're hearing me condemning it. It's a lie." And this is how you tell the truth from falsehood. And this is why being able to tell the truth is something that is just absolutely being eliminated from our educational system. The ability to hear two different sides of an argument and then use your own mental processes and facilities, or faculties, I should say, to weigh these two things against the evidence and common sense and come to a conclusion. And this is, again, as we've said so many times before, you can't have a free society without fundamentally good people. You can't have a free society without fundamentally sensible people. And you can't have a free society without fundamentally decent people. Now, we've gone a long time with a significant portion of our population, none of those things, but it was still a healthy society. I think it's the healthiest society that ever lived on the face of this earth. They're trying to conserve it. There have always been criminals. There's always been liars, always been politicians, always been people willing to do this. But there was also at least a standard to which you could hold them. If somebody, as we've talked about before, Scott, 50 years ago, 60 years ago, if somebody had an affair while they were married to somebody, they're done. It's over. It's not even close. It's not like they're going to lose by a few points. They're finished. there was a time for most of the history of this country when if you committed the kind of act, even in private, that was such a naked reflection on your character, it would disqualify you from public office. And those days are, I think I have to say, they're gone. I cannot imagine. I really cannot imagine. I don't know. I can't think of a single thing that Barack Obama or Hillary Clinton could have done that would have got the press to go after them the way they should go after anybody who breaks the law and lowers the standards with that kind of impunity.
Well, 5 days a week, Bill Whittle brings cogent analysis of the day's news to a discerning audience. The people who watch this program, and especially those who support this program by becoming members at BillWhittle.com, have demonstrated over the years that they are willing to listen to all sides, that they are careful in their distribution of what they find on the internet, that they understand that there are people who are trying to hoodwink them, and they also know the clear ring of the truth. And we appreciate those people, not only for their financial support, but just for their courage and their grounding in principle. We invite you to become one of them by going to BillWhittle.com and clicking that Become a Member link. So for Bill Whittle, I'm Scott Ott. Thanks to the members at BillWhittle.com for making this possible.